Welcome everyone, my name is Marco and you are about to form a new random access memory. And today's memory is about language. And again, today we have the pleasure of having Ulrich in the podcast. Hi Ulrich.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone.
He is, as I said, a mathematician. He was with us in the topic about math. And today we will discuss about language. As always, you can find the list of topics in the description below, or you can simply click on the YouTube bar in the video. And we will divide our podcast in 3 questions. The first one is relative to precision in language. So there are some languages that are very precise, like math, like some codes that we can use, for example, in law or programming languages. And other languages are sort of less precise, so less codified. And they are, for example, the natural language. But if you go even less codified, you sort of reach artistic areas of expression, let's say. And we will discuss the pros and cons about precise and imprecise language. Then the second question will be about the link between the language and the thought. So in many cultures in the history of mankind, the language and the thought were linked with each other. So one influenced the other. More often, the language influenced the way we thought. So we will think about how is it evolving in the present day, the language, and how could it be the future, utopia or dystopia, so to speak. And then we will have the third and last topic, which is about how homogeneous is a language, where we have some languages, like for instance, the ancient Latin and the present day English, that are very homogeneous. So you can move in a vast territory and the language doesn't change so much, while we have others, like for instance, Italians and Germans, which are characterized by, at least in the past, a large number of dialects. So why some are spatially and temporally more homogeneous and more stable than others. So let's start with the first question: precision in language, pros and cons. What's your opinion about these? Like, is it better to have a precise language, or it's better to have a fuzzy, hazy language, let's say?
Okay. So a very accurate, not ambiguous language is programming language. The computer must know what needs to be done. And there it's a good choice to choose a very accurate language. When we speak, we use a less accurate language, a language which is much more ambiguous. And it works very well when we speak. So we wouldn't want to use a programming language and a very strict syntax and semantics for our spoken language. And we can do lots of things with our natural language. Natural languages can be very poetic. There is lots of room for imagination. It can be romantic, you can be ironic and sarcastic. You can bring up creativity. And this is really helpful, especially for creative work.
Yes, no, I mean, you bring up the most extreme point, which is the idea of conveying emotion. Somehow it seems very hard to convey emotion with an extremely precise language. Although I have to say that it happened in my life to see some poetry in Python, like something like an infinite while loop regarding love or something like this. I mean, it is possible, but yeah, it seems that somehow the precise languages are less powerful than the imprecise languages, which is somehow counterintuitive, because you would tend to think that if the language is more precise, you have less room for misinterpretation. But actually, the room for misinterpretation is the real power of the natural language. Because if I say table, both of us, we know what we are talking about, but we might have 2 different things in mind, you know? That's the power. Like the single words, the single concept are not well specified, and also the rule of the language are not well specified. And this is what characterizes the working of the human brain, you know. And it's more powerful because we can certainly talk better with other humans than with the computer. So let's say that in a sense, even if we ignore the fact that the computer is much faster, and if we ignore the fact that the computer holds better memory and has a larger bandwidth of communication with other computers, we cannot, if we ignore these things, we can argue that a human can do everything that a computer can do, while a computer cannot do everything that a human can do. And this is largely a communication problem. I mean, I assume that we have enough computing capacity on Earth to reproduce the thinking mechanism of at least one human. But we cannot communicate with the computer in the right way. It's like it's harder to. I mean, the computer is formal, so you need to speak in a formal way with the computer, so you can give instructions. But you have less freedom in communication. Like the imprecise language give you some freedom. That if you bring it to the extreme consequences, you go in the kingdom of art, you know, poetry, representative arts. There, it's like there is a strong need for lack of precision, especially in the modern time. If you think about an impressionist painting compared to a previous painting, it's more imprecise, you know. There are some splash of color, and that's what makes it beautiful, what can communicate the message, you know. The message is like the perception of light, etc. But it's not only about art, you know. It's the fact that it's very easy for me to express a wide array of things, you know. I can give a command to you saying please, because with humans you have to say please, but I can give a command to you, so please Uli, go to pick up my grocery. But I can also speak with you as I'm doing, you know, just a transfer of information, you know. And with the computer is much more difficult, because I need to be extremely specific to give a command, and also I cannot dialogue with the computer. I mean, I can ask questions, like I can ask Google and get answers, but yeah, it's everything. It's much more specific, and nowadays it improved a lot thanks to artificial neural network and artificial intelligence. Like probably in the 70s, I wasn't alive back then, or in the 80s, it was even more specific and even more precise, you know, the way. Yeah, there is also this other aspect. Sorry, I'm having a very long stream of consciousness, but like it seems that over time, the computer is growing imprecise. So thanks to the neural network and thanks to the network of the internet, we have things such as Google that show a limited understanding of the natural language. They are starting to show a limited understanding of the natural language, you know. At first they started to be able to recognize typos, and now increasingly they start to interpret the query that you do, you know. I mean, before it was difficult to put the right query in a research algorithm, while now you just say a couple of words. I mean, for once probably we learn to speak better with the artificial intelligence because we are used to it. So we know that there are some, you know, how to, for example, it's how to do something. It's a good query, you know, because it's like it's a conventional. So on one side we are learning to communicate with the artificial intelligence, and on the other side the artificial intelligence is getting better at understanding us. So we certainly have a better and better communication channel. So it's like yeah, maybe in some sense our own language is becoming more formal and more precise, and in the meantime, the language of the computer is becoming more informal and more imprecise, you know. So we are sort of blurring the line of the human-machine interface somehow. But yeah, this doesn't answer the question, because there are still some areas in which probably a precise language is better than an imprecise one. For example, if you are in a law court, you know, if somebody sue you, then you will hear lawyers and judges speaking, and they have a pretty formalized way of speech that for me, like, I'm a native Italian speaker, but for me, when I try to read the documents, like the legal documents written in Italian, it's extremely difficult for me to understand the message there, you know. It's like and somehow this is a language that developed, you know, like the legal language developed, and so it means that it's filling a niche, you know. So there is a need for this sort of precise language. The point is the scope, you know. There are some scope, of course. If you want to, like, even though the computer is getting better, to understand the natural language, it's still needed. The programming ability, it's still an ability, you know. If you are good at programming, you most likely will find a job everywhere, you know. It's a good perk to have. So it means that there are still many areas in which we still need this sort of formal language. I mean, why for you we need it?
Yeah, for effectiveness, the specialized languages are work very good. So as you said, in law, in medicine, if I go to the doctor, there it's helpful, or if doctors need to decide what cure is best for you, then what treatment is best for you, then that's where a very accurate language is important. Or if you think about the operation table, so if I need to do specialized work, or if I'm an architect, there it's important that I have very precise terminology, and I need to accomplish a very specific task. So if it's a very specific task, then also the computer or a robot needs precise instructions and does a good job. Whereas if I want to create something new, I need creativity. So in research, it's something in between, because on the one hand you have publications where you need to convey a very precise meaning. On the other hand, you want creativity. So when researchers speak, it's good that the new ideas come out, and this maybe happens at during drinking a coffee and speaking, or going to the restaurant and speaking loosely about what you are doing. So
Yes.
There's this mixture between accuracy and vagueness, where you need to just leave some wiggle room for creativity. And the table, for example, the powerful idea of a table is that I think about something else, and then I give you my ideas. And these ideas can bring up new ideas in your mind. And that's what the computer nowadays is not that good in doing.
So let's go to the second question, which is the link between the language and the thought. Like over the human history, especially in ancient Greek, as far as my understanding goes, there was no difference between the thoughts and the language. So it was understood that the capacity to think was linked to the capacity to speak. You know, that these two things were interlinked, and it's a particularly pernicious area of philosophy, I think, because each of us, of course, has a language, and each of us, at least when we communicate our thoughts, we use language. So personally, I have to say that I never experience the sensation that I have a thought that I cannot articulate in language. Thus, there should be, I mean, thus the language is perfectly able of rendering every of my thought, you know. So it's like my thought can at most apparently be a subsystem of my language, and because my language is generated by my thought, the language also should be a subsystem of my thought. But if both are a subsystem of each other, then it should be proof of a perfect identity. I am sure that people way back in time and way smarter than me have thought this already, but yeah, I mean, I tend to think that there is no, or at least in our modern day, you know, nowadays we are humans and we are grown up in a place where there is a language, and so we cannot imagine a thought process without language. For me, it's unimaginable. I mean, there is a part of me hidden that thinks, no, thought must be more than simple language, you know. I have this sort of feeling in the back of my mind, but if I think about it, it never occurred to me to be unable to express a thought. So they might be the same. And for the Greek philosophers, they were the same. And there is a very interesting work from George Orwell, which is the book 1984, where basically he described this future dystopian society, like a totalitarian regime, where they actively reduce the number of words in the English language to make it so that it's easier to control the people, because you can control the thought of the people, you know. So if you cancel all the nuance and you make the language, yeah, to go back to the previous question, you make the language more precise, you can sort of control the people. And we have to think that the languages evolve all the time, you know. So the English language is now evolving. Is evolving because of many reasons. But the question is, where is it going? I mean, are we going toward 1984 dystopian hypothesis, or are we going toward instead a better society? Because I don't know, maybe we, like, which words are we losing and which words are we gaining? Like, which sensation do you have when you read an old book?
I think we are going towards a better society in that regard. I'm usually quite pessimistic, but I'm optimistic on this one. We have vocabulary which is in theory increasing, because we can use what was used in the past and we create new words every day. In the everyday language and among everyday people, also because distances become shorter due to ease of traveling, we are losing maybe a good use of the language, especially in fast communication, if you think about SMS and instant messaging. Whereas in the past, we had to think more about what we wrote when we wrote, for example, a letter. But we have more possibilities. And I don't think that's more a political issue. I don't think that we are going towards a centralized society where we lose the education, we do not get a good education, and therefore we do not learn. And then if we are not able to speak very well, we are oppressed by higher and more richer beings. Another food for thought regarding Greek language is that this is food for thought for the audience. In Greek, you had less words with several meanings. And I make this example of logos, which can mean word or reason, or I think also power or force. And this was a problem when translating the Bible. So if you have, in the beginning, there was the word, or there was the force, or there was the reasoning. So you are not sure what exactly is meant. And therefore the Greek, for the Greek, maybe in their mind it was the same. You said that nowadays you can express more precisely what you want to or what you are thinking about. And this then can also improve our thinking. So overall speaking, I think we are going in the right direction.
So we are going in the direction of more words for you.
We have more words available.
I mean, in the long term,
we use only very little of the full potential.
Yes, that's the point, you know, because on the long run, it must be like this, because when a language is young, it doesn't have many thought. So if we think about the primitive tribes, they typically have very few words for colors. So the very primitive uncontacted tribes, it was discovered time and time again that they tend to have only black and white as a color. So they use analogy. So if they want to say red, they will say black, like the blood is, you know. And then eventually they will eventually add a third color, which is usually the red. I mean, there is also usually a precise, like if you look the size of the tribe and the level of complexity of the society, the number of colors eventually tends to increase. And the increase, it's always similar. Like the first two are black and white, the third one is red, and if I'm not wrong, the fourth one is blue. So if you have blue, very, very likely you already have red, black, and white. But if you have red, you not necessarily have blue. So the colors at least are increasing.
I have a question on that. So why not green, as green is so prevalent in nature?
I'm not even sure that it's blue, the fourth one. It might be green. I think it's blue, and I have no precise idea why. Perhaps because there are less blue things in nature. I mean, the sky is blue, which is very important, very prominent, but there are very few blue things. So if you find something blue, like a blue butterfly, for example, you really have the need to describe that. This potentially could be an explanation.
Yeah, so it could be that green is everywhere, so to speak, and therefore it's the normal thing and you need to have words for something else. This maybe explains also why red, because red is maybe associated to danger. I'm not sure that that's the case in the origin. Nowadays, for sure, red means you need to be alert.
Yes, I mean, red berries tend to be, I mean, they tend to be dangerous, you know, like if you are in a forest and you see red berries, unless you really know that is the, you know, frutti di bosco thing, if you have some spherical red berries, personally, I wouldn't eat it. And red insects are particularly gross, although the ladybug, it's completely harmless. But yeah, I pretty much think it signifies danger in nature.
I'm not sure about that, because you have strawberries which are red. You have quite a few berries which are red and can be eaten.
Yes, but yeah, that's right. That's right. So they want it to be eaten, actually. Yeah. So it's a bit ambiguous as a color, but this is beside the point. So let's finally talk about the last question: why some language are homogeneous and some other not? I mean, both spatially and temporally. Like there are some languages, like for instance, the modern day English and the ancient Latin language, that are understood and are shared in a very wide area for a seasonably long period of time. I mean, if you think about the Latin, so the language of the ancient Rome, basically you have that not only it was very widespread during the Roman Emperor, but even later on, the cultivated person, so the people of science, the people of philosophy, they were keep speaking Latin, you know. So it's like somehow this language was codified and last for long, and last for long distances, while the Middle Age European languages were basically a patchwork, you know. It was a continuum. You know, if you were in southern France, probably your language sounded more like Italian than if you were in eastern France, where probably sounded more like German. And And if you go closer and closer to the Italian border, it sounds more and more like Italian, when eventually it becomes Italian, you know. At some point you are speaking an Italian dialect, like maybe in Turin or in Genoa or in Nice, where apparently they were speaking an Italian dialect before, but yeah, never mind. Like, the point is that also today we have, for example, German language, which is pretty diverse. It's still characterized, especially in the Alpine region, it's still characterized by very strong dialects, which are basically languages. You have Arabic also, it's pretty diverse. While you have English, that it is true that it has some degree of diversity in England, but for example, an Australian and a South African can understand each other quite well. Like they can start a decent level of communication in few minutes, you know. So it means that the language is not that different.
Yeah, regarding the first point, so why do some languages have more dialects that subsist, so they don't vanish? A good example I know of is Austria, where even at university, professors sometimes speak in dialect, and they are also criticized for that. So German people coming to Austria say, come on, how can you speak dialect in front of the audience at the university? We cannot understand you. And to some extent, it's that they are so accustomed to it that they are not even able to speak the German spoken in Germany. So you have really different types of German. And why? Maybe because they were quite isolated and also able to stay isolated from each other. So they were enough powerful or enough successful in their own country to stay there, and for geographic reasons. So they had mountains in between, and
Yes.
these mountains in the beginning kept them apart, but they were also quite successful in their own country. They didn't move so much.
But do they speak in the television? Because for me, a very important aspect is the presence of infrastructure, you know. Like the ancient Rome, what was so special about it? The roads. Like they were great roads constructor. So they were able to spread the Latin language basically in the whole of Europe and in the whole of North Africa and in a chunk of the Middle East, basically, like till Turkey, etc. So like the infrastructure allow communication, and if you can exchange enough data, then the language, then there is the need for a common language. Because I think that the perk of the common language, the perk of the big languages like Latin and English is the fact that the ideas can spread much faster. You know, you can communicate with more people. This is the reason why we are both Italian, even though of different ethnicity, like your German mother tongue actually, but we are both Italian, but we are speaking English actually in this podcast. Why? Because we want to spread our idea as far as possible. So we use this sort of codified, this sort of top-down languages. While there are some bottom-up languages that are the language of the people, like the language that develop spontaneously, and these languages are geographically localized. So the case of Austria is a bit strange, and I think like a very powerful infrastructure that we have nowadays is, for example, the television, and later on even internet. So I wonder, do they speak Hochdeutsch, so the standard German in television in Austria, or do they speak Austrian?
They have their own television where it's a different kind of German, so you could say Austrian. Of course, it's not really the dialect spoken by people on the street, but it's a different language. You have other words. You have also the grammar is somewhat different, and this is even more pronounced in Switzerland, where it's actually also for me difficult to understand if I listen to the Swiss television. I wanted to add 2 points. One about Latin, which is, it was also a way to exert power. So to make simple people not understand, if you think about church and the Holy Mass, or about lawyers, or about physicians speaking among each other to show that they know more than simple people. And then my other thought was regarding why can a South African understand an Australian if both speak English? They use a quite simple English. So we can communicate in English, but we are not that rich in vocabulary than a native speaker. And then it's even easier to understand. So it's easier for us to understand another Italian speaking English, or an Indian speaking English, or a German speaker or a South African speaking English than actually people from Scotland or Ireland.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the Scots, maybe they have some dialect, but in my opinion, you can understand them pretty well when they speak English. They have a very plain, but the Irish, yes, I think they tend to bite the words very often, actually.
And why do we understand the United States people very well? From television, in my opinion, from movies. We hear it much more than Scottish.
Yes, but in fact, this is the point, you know, like if you have an infrastructure, you can influence the language. Like if you have a powerful infrastructure, so if you are able to communicate far and wide on a territorial level, it's in effect a form of power. Also, I have the sensation that these languages, like the English language or also the Italian language for that matter, these are not spontaneous language. Like for the Italian, I'm sure, you know, the spontaneous language are the dialects, which are different in different parts of Italy. But the Italian language is like basically the Florence dialect, but it was modified, you know, like there are some books where like it's a written language. It's a language that was born written. So it's a more top down, you know, it's an authoritative language. It's not a spontaneous born by himself language, you know. And I have the sensation that probably the scientific Latin of the Middle Age must have been like this, you know, a conventional language that people agree in order to exert power and to communicate further. And there is a very interesting idea. I mean, just for a conclusion, if we will become a multi-planetary species, as Elon Musk wants us to say, it would be very interesting because they might speak English or Chinese Mandarin in the colonies, but the point is that when they speak with us, there will be an enormous latency, because Mars could be at 15 light minutes from us, or at least 7 or 8 light minutes in the best case, and thus it means that there cannot be real-time communication. You know, like at some point the colonists will have real-time communication only among other Martians, and with the Earth people, with Earthlings, they will have only delayed communication. So it would be interesting to imagine how that would end up. So it's time to say goodbye. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe if you still didn't, and remember to come back next week for a new random access memory. Thank you and bye-bye. Have a great week.